Hey, it's Marthea Pitts, the MSW coach, and I want to know how strong is your career messaging? Right? So, I'm just going to jump right into it. Career messaging is essentially the make or break between your ability to get macro social work interviews and ultimately macro social work job offers, as well as once you're in your macro job, your ability to progressively advance through your career. And so what career messaging is your ability to articulate to employers on paper, written and verbally, what makes you qualified for the job that you're going after. And so a lot of social workers refer to it as translating your experiences. However, I call it career messaging because it's way more than like transferable skills, which a lot of people know about. So generally when people find me, they know about transferable skills. However, when trying to identify just your transferable skills, is nearly impossible for a social worker, especially who is coming from a largely heavy case management direct practice background, because we all know as case managers, they have us doing everything under the sun, right? So you're doing a little bit of this, you're doing a little bit of that, you're doing a little bit of this. And if in all of that, right, because you've done so much, you've worked with a multitude of populations, you've done a ton of different scopes of work, you worked on many different projects and teams, it's nearly impossible to try to capture all of your transferable skills. And so what I teach my coaching clients is that we don't focus on skills, we focus on experiences, right? Because for macro employers, they value experiences over skills, right? With macro employers, they're looking for a very specific job candidate. I always call it the unicorn. They're looking for the unicorn. And so for the unicorn, they're looking for you to have a specific like set of experience, knowledge, subject matter expertise that is well above a transferable skill, which is normally something like manage the caseload, project management, program management, things like that, like general skills that aren't specific to a certain industry or population or setting. Experiences are more specific and tangible to the thing that you would be working on as a macro social worker. So I'm explaining what career messaging is. It's the way that you write your resume in a way that appeals to employers, and then it's also the way that you articulate your experiences in a job interview. That's why I always used to go on a rant about the fact that on your resume you should not have managed a caseload or conduct a biopsychosocial exam, because those are skills, right? That's something that any social worker can be trained on. It may look a little bit different based on the organization type they're in, the scope of work they do, but still it's something that is standard around all like social work programs. However, when you dig deeper into experiences can look many different ways. I have one coaching client who landed a macro job. Her experience in working in social services, that she fundraised over $2.5 million. I helped her identify and uncover that experience, and that experience alone landed her a macro job in a philanthropic organization where she's been promoted to leadership, where she's now in the top 5% of her industry, where she is managing a large multi-million dollar funding, like what do they call it, family fund. She's told me 100 times of a family fund, and she's ensuring that her population, which is youth, get the adequate funding and support that they need to provide quality programming in her state, right? And all of that was because we focused on the experience of her doing this massive campaign to fundraise money for her social service organization, right? And so that is what got her job, the experience of her leading this campaign, managing the team, coming up with the ideas, coming up with how to target the funders and all of the different things. And so I wanted to first give you an understanding of what career messaging is, and the fact that in messaging when you work with me, we focus on your experiences and not your skills. And then I also wanted to share with you the 3 key areas of my career messaging framework. So take out a pen, paper, note-taking device, run back this replay, because this will really help you get clear on your translation, what you probably call it translating of your experiences, but it's career messaging. So I have a three-prong approach to getting career messaging right that I teach all of my coaching clients. It's what helps them land macro interviews time after time after time, because their resumes are just so optimized that it's undeniable that they're the unicorn on paper. But even more than that, is what helps them ace what I call master macro interviews and get job offers, where it's to the point like employers can't deny that they are the unicorn. So the first key area, and I'm looking at my notes, it's been a long day. I've been up since 4 a.m. my time. So the first area is that when it comes to career messaging, it has, for my requirements, it has to be impact driven. So impact driven is where we focus specifically again on those experiences. However, what I'm teaching you to pull out, what you need to focus on is the outcomes, the results, and the key contributions that came out of that experience, right? So I love a good example. So just a generic example, it will look like for that example with my coaching client, it will look like how much money she raised with that effort that she did in her social service organization. We would really draw out and really illustrate on paper that she fundraised over $2.5 million, that she led a team of multiple people in that effort, that she worked with multiple community partners. So again, impact driven. However, the impact, the data that you're using, whatever it may be, has to be applicable to the organization that you're applying for, right? This is why it's so important to tailor your resume for every job. As much as you don't want to, you have to, because what you're talking about will vary based on the jobs that you're targeting. So the first key area is impact driven. The second area for career messaging that I've a part of my framework is that your language has to be industry aligned. What I see a lot of social workers do is attempt to write their resumes or go into interviews using the same micro level language that they're accustomed to as case managers. And that's why you're not getting job offers. That's why you're not getting even interviews, because you're not using industry. My phone is ringing. It's because you're not using industry aligned language. And so in order to get an interview, in order to get a job, interview and a job offer, you have to learn the language of the industry or organization type that you're targeting. And then you have to craft your experiences around the way that they understand it. Right? I always, it's usually once a month, maybe 2 times a month, that I get on a get to know you chat with a social worker who's coming from a very heavy clinical background, and they always start rambling off some clinical terminology and language, and I'm always looking at them like a deer in headlights, and I have to pause them for a moment and say, can you explain what that is to me? By this time, I've worked with so many clinical social workers in my career coaching program that I kind of understand a lot of your language, but I don't. A lot of it I don't, because I'm not clinical. So, and I actually told one of my coaching clients the other week, I said, you talk like a DSM-5, right? I mean, is it still a 5? See, I don't know. I haven't touched a DSM manual since my MSW degree program, which is a little over 5 to 6 years ago. So I say that to say that for industry aligned language, you have to really understand how the people in the area of work that you're focused on talk. And you have to mirror that language as much as possible. So that is a process in and of itself. It's not something that you can necessarily just sit down and figure out in one step. This is why, in my coaching program, my coaching clients spend about 30 to 45 days really getting an understanding of how do the people in the industry that they're targeting speak. What language do they use? What terminology do they use to talk about it, to figure it out, really? And it's like almost like cracking the code. And so what they then do with that information is switch out their micro language for the new macro language. Because macro, people on the macro level talk very different than people on the micro level, because they're focused on they're taking two different approaches to the work. People on the micro level are coming from a practitioner role, so they're focusing on addressing the symptom, the presenting symptom of the people in front of them. Whereas people on the macro level, they are addressing the systemic issue, the root cause issue, and they talk about those things in completely different ways. So the second prong of my career messaging framework is that you have to use industry aligned language. You cannot on your resume be using the language of a micro practitioner. You have to strategically be positioning yourself on paper as an expert, and it's a way to do that. And I just explained that. So, the third key area of my career messaging framework is that you have to make certain that you are writing your bullets and speaking in interviews in a way that is stakeholder specific. So the example that I'm going to give you is like, I could have two coaching clients, both of them interested in working in higher education, right? And one is interested in working in research, and the other one may be interested in working in philanthropy. Those are two completely different areas of work. However, they're both in the same organization type, right? Which could also be referred to as industry. But they are going to need to talk differently. They're going to need to write their resume bullets in a very different way. They're going to have to craft their career experience in a very different way. And so this is why career messaging is so important. The person who did research would be talking about things related to research, right? So again, in tailoring their resume, they're extracting all of their research related experience. Whereas the person who's interested in philanthropy, they would be tailoring all of their experience specific to philanthropy. And so I wanted to talk about that because today I had office hours with my coaching clients. And one of my coaching clients who's working on drafting the remainder of her master macro resume, which is one of the major takeaways from the career accelerator that I have, that everyone drafts a master resume, right? Because what I always tell them is, while you're sitting in this time and place, this is the perfect time to go ahead and write out and translate all of your jobs into macro language so you don't have to do it ever again, and you'll just add your new jobs to it. So she's in the process of drafting the remainder of her resume after she's done the resume intensive with me. And on her resume, she had questions about refining her career messaging specific to the industry that she's targeting, right? And so her stakeholder group would be training and development, but she's interested in doing it in a specific industry. And so today I was helping her troubleshoot where she was having where she needed some refining of her messaging to make certain that the words she was using are words that will appeal to the readers. That's the whole point of career messaging. You want to talk in a way that people can understand. I used to tell my coaching clients, like, you want to talk in a plain language way. And because you never know who is the person on the other end receiving the information. You don't know if they have a high context or low context about the thing that you're talking about. Because the truth is, on interview panels, even for screening your resumes, a lot of that is done by admin support people who don't work on the immediate team that you're interviewing for. So if you have a resume that is heavily like technical in nature, very like social worky. I know that's not a word, but we're going to use it. Social worky. You're going to lose the reader, and they're not going to understand, one, why you applied, or two, how to determine if you qualify. So career messaging when writing your macro resume and interviewing for macro jobs and advancing forward in your career is very, very, very important, because it's how people understand who you are, what you do, what value you add, why you are qualified for the position, and essentially why they should hire you. And so I wanted to talk about that because it's so important. And one of the takeaways that I wanted to give you is a way to test out your current messaging as a micro social worker, or maybe you're a macro social worker. And it's something that I did with my coaching clients last week in our weekly coaching call. And what it is that I want you to ask 3 people that you know, love, trust, who you feel safe with. Go and ask them tomorrow, one by one, what you do for a living, right? And if they come back with 1 or 3 answers, I'm going to tell you where your issue lies and if you need to work on strengthening your career messaging. So if you ask person A, what do I do for a living? And they come back and say to you, you're a social worker, right? They don't talk about any of your specialization. They don't talk about the population you work with. They can't talk to you about like, what's the organization type you work with? Do you work with a nonprofit? Do you work with a social service agency? Do you work with the government? If they can't name, they don't have to get super specific to the department, but if they can't generally tell you more than you're a social worker, that means you need to work on your career messaging as soon as possible. Because if the people close to you cannot articulate what you do, then that tells me that employers most definitely cannot articulate what you do, because you're not telling them in a way that they are able to. You're maybe not telling them at all. That's most likely what it is for a lot of people. You're not telling the people what you do, who you are, what you're interested in, and if that's you, you need to stop that immediately. But you're usually not telling them, or you're not telling them in a way that is understandable for them. Again, a lot of social workers, especially my clinical social workers, talk like walking, talking DSMs, right? So I challenge you to really think about, go back and watch the replay of this live, and I challenge you to really think about those 3 key areas of impact-driven, industry-aligned language, and stakeholder-specific. But even more than that, I want you to bring it down. Bring it down from up here. We know you're super smart. We know you are the expert, but bring the language down, right? So the first response is the person is like, oh, you're a social worker. They can't tell you anything more than that. You really need to work on your career messaging as soon as possible. And it's probably a primary reason why you may be struggling with getting job interviews and offers, okay? Because if you can't verbally explain it to the people you love, that means that you're struggling to explain it on paper and most definitely in an interview. The second response, if you ask someone, what do I do for a living? And they say, you're a social worker and you work at such and such organization, and that's all that they can tell you, you need to work on your messaging as well, right? They should at least be able to name like the population you work with, or like give, even if it's not 100% accurate, they should at least be able to say, you work at the child welfare office down the road, and don't you go to the people's homes to do home visits, right? They should at least be able to give you some other descriptor other than like the organization, because largely they may know about the organization because they've seen you at work or dropped you off there or called you there. So that's another sign that you need to work on your messaging. The third thing is if you ask them and they explicitly say, you work at the child welfare office and you do parent reunification and you've been down there for a few years and you really love it, that means that your career messaging is good, right? It's good on that level. But I still would encourage you to go through the 3 key areas and like doing assessments to see how your messaging is to employers. But if your family member, your friend, your support person can say like where you work, what you do, how you do it, that means that you're doing a good job. And I want to give you a kudos for that. And if your messaging is not so strong after you do the test, no worries. Just work on refining the message. I gave an assignment to one of my coaching clients today who's working on her messaging in a different area, not about resume writing or interviewing, but I said, what I want you to do is each day I want you to come home and tell your loved one, give your loved one a 5-minute recap of what you did today. Right? I said, I want you to do that for the next 2 weeks. Every day when you come home, give them a recap of what you did in 5 minutes or less, and have them repeat back to you what you did and see if it matches up. Right? The reason you do that is, yes, to see where the gaps are, where the issues are, but more so for practice. The reason a lot of people's career messaging is off the mark, is not on point, is because you don't practice telling the people. And a lot of that is a byproduct from being in case management jobs where no one's asking you your thoughts, opinions, ideas, things like that. So you really have to start creating your own opportunities for professional development, a way to like refine and get strong in that area. And so that's one strategy that I teach my coaching clients, and I want you to do the same for the next 2 weeks. Look, I'm coaching you, okay? For the next 2 weeks, I want you to work on your career messaging. I want you to come home every day, even if you're a pet parent and it's just you and your pet. Well, maybe that's not a good example, but it could be. Repeat it back to your pet. Maybe record yourself and listen back to the recording and say, like, did that make sense what I said? Like, you can listen to it yourself and assess it, and do that for 2 weeks. It's about building the muscle. That's what we're working on, because career messaging is the make or break between you getting an interview and you getting a job offer and you being able to progressively advance in your career. Again, we cannot focus on transferable skills. That's the difference between a mission-driven job seeker and an entrepreneur and a universal job seeker. Universal job seekers, they can focus on transferable skills because they're just trying to get any job, a job. However, us as mission-driven job seekers, we're trying to get very specific jobs. So with that, we can't come to the table with general information. We have to be very specific, very precise about what makes us qualified for this position, because those employers are looking for very specific job applicants. And so I share with you what career messaging is, why it's so important, the 3 key areas of my career messaging framework that doesn't miss. My people get interviews left and right. They have no problem articulating to employers who they are, what they do, what value they add. They know how to tailor their messaging based on the stakeholder audience that they're talking to and targeting. It works, right? And then I also gave you a way to assess if your messaging was strong, as well as a way to get better at it, right? So consider this a mini masterclass. I just gave you coaching in 30 minutes or less. If you're just getting here, watch the replay back. Nothing I share is fluff. It's going to help you get better. And so I strongly encourage you to take the steps that I gave you in this mini masterclass of coaching and start implementing it tomorrow, because it's going to make you stronger. It's going to help you to show up more competitively in the job market for the jobs that you want, and ultimately it will help you just feel more confident as a career seeker. Okay, so I want to talk about career messaging because it's super important, and I know a lot of people need to work on it. I'm gearing up for the virtual career planning retreat that's starting tomorrow. A lot of people registered for it. Registration closed last night. I'm so excited. We're going to have 3 days this weekend of strategic career planning, where I'm going to be taking you through my frameworks, my techniques, and all of the things that you need to know to create you a career plan to strategically pivot into other unrelated areas of social work, which is macro social work. And then on March 9th, I'm getting ready for enrollment to be open for cohort 18 of the Micro to Macro Career Accelerator, which is my 3-month group career coaching program for Master of Social Work degree holders, where I teach you how to identify, apply, and interview for your dream macro social work job in 3 months or less. It's going to be cohort 18. I've been doing this for 5 years. Over 180 social workers have landed macro jobs, and I'm so excited that we offering another cohort. If you're interested in learning more, click the link in my bio. There's a wait list with tons of information that you can read, and then you can also schedule a get to know you chat with me where we can talk free of charge. I don't charge you, and I can learn more about what your needs are, what your career goals are, what obstacles you are facing to getting macro jobs, and we can see if we'll be a good fit to work together. But yeah, enrollment will open on March 9th, and I'm so excited. Good morning, ma'am. I'm from India. Oh, hey. I love that. Look at you. Thank you for being here. Make certain that you watch the replay there. I love that. From India. And it's morning. It's late here. What time is it? It's 9:20 p.m. where I am. So enjoy the rest of your day. If it's night for you, good night. Happy macro career planning. Bye.